Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you. How you doing this morning?
I'm working on my New Year's resolutions.
Oh yeah.
Remember we used to talk about those? It is funny. Years ago, every December, January, we always talked a lot about, since the pandemic.
Yeah.
They seem inconsequential.
Right.
Somehow, New Year's resolutions seem somehow inconsequential.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we are in mid-January.
True. We haven't even talked about those at all. So
right. Yeah. Yeah, we used to talk about that.
Maybe
so, but it's good to see you. It's good to see you on camera, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to see you. So the last couple of weeks, last couple of podcasts, we've talked about challenging behaviors in kids. We talked about challenging behaviors in teenagers, and we're going to kind of continue that conversation today and discuss some additional strategies. That of course is what everyone wants and what everyone's looking for is we recognize that our kid is having some behavior issues and stuff. We want to know what to do about it. And so we're going to present some information from someone we've mentioned before, Dr. Ross Green, his group. And we're going to present some information from his group. But, but as we get started with it, we've kind of alluded to this over the last couple of weeks, and we just want to mention it again that, sometimes, when you think about strategies, when you're thinking about difficult kids, there's a few pitfalls, I think, that parents get snagged on. And we just want to remind you that, to watch out for these, like the idea that, this isn't stuff that changes quickly.
Right.
We're talking about challenging behaviors. We're often talking about behaviors that have been around for a little while, and it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take a lot of work to see some improvement and see some change in those behaviors.
That's right. And you make a good point. These behaviors have been around for years.
Yeah.
And they become habitual. They become habits. And everybody knows that you don't break long-standing habits quickly. It takes time and effort.
Well, Richard,
especially with teenagers.
How many times have we seen a teenager, a 15, 16-year-old, and their parent says, well, he's been doing this since he was 3 years old. Well, he's been doing it his whole life. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to make some changes. So
let me get this right. He's been doing it for 5 years. You're not going to change that quickly.
Right.
I mean, this is a huge undertaking.
Right.
And you cannot underestimate how long it's going to take and how much effort it's going to take. And I think we all, and I don't blame parents, I think we all have that tendency to say, okay, let's fix this. Okay, but you're trying to fix something that's 5 or 6 or 7 years old in duration, and that's not going to happen easily and without effort.
Which is also why a lot of people go towards medicine. They want the medicine to work, and it's always, it's fascinating because that is exactly what we expect with medication, is that, if you have, if you're, in some physical pain, you go and take some Advil, and, 30, 45 minutes later, you start to have some relief. And people sort of expect the same thing from mental health and psychiatric medications. And so when they find out that it takes, 3, 4, 5 weeks before they start seeing any change, a lot of people don't make it that long, but because we want a quick fix, and these things don't fix quickly.
No, they take a long time to thaw out. They take a long time to evaporate. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time.
Yeah. Now, another thing that we would like for you to keep in mind is that, many times parents will come in and say, I have 3 kids, I have 2 that are super easy, and I'm doing everything exactly the same way with this guy, and it just isn't working. And I'm just doing the same thing. I don't understand. We need to make sure that we mention that these kids, every kid is different, and what works for other kids may not work for this particular child. And so you need to step back, and you need to look and parent the child that you have, and not the child that you thought you were going to have, or use the same exact situation strategies with this kid that you're using with your other kids, because it may not work.
Yeah, there is that line that we need to be aware of. When you're dealing with teenagers, it's often very difficult to tell the difference between what is sort of normal teenage misbehavior with what is, when do I get into serious diagnostic issues? So how do I know that my teenager is just being rebellious, or my teenager has oppositional defiant disorder? And sometimes that's a fine line. But once you admit that this child is different, then the approaches that you typically use as a parent are probably not going to work with that child.
Right.
And one of the mistakes that we often make is we say, well, this should work. I've said this 1,000 times. I keep punishing him. Well, that's the first sign that this child might be a little bit different. Absolutely. And so it's going to take what we advise, it's going to take a different approach. The stuff that you normally use and that you read about and that is available to all of us as parents really doesn't work with these kids.
Right. Yeah. And I think that parents can eventually see it when you really break it down for them, and you sort of encourage them, or sometimes force them to kind of step back and look at it from from a worldview, just a little bit, just zoom way out and look at the whole picture. If you have an 8 or 9 or 15 or 16-year-old who's presenting with a lot of challenging behaviors, typically that's not something that's just right now. That is something that has developed over a period of time. And so everything that you have been doing so far helped to create that. So I use the example of spanking. Parents will say, I spank him and I'll do it every time that he does this behavior, or every time that he acts out, or every time that he talks back. But that behavior doesn't stop. And so we have to encourage the parent to recognize that, you've been using that strategy.
Right.
You can continue to use that strategy, but you're going to continue to get what you've always got.
That's right.
Not going to change just because you hit harder, or because you hit more frequently, or because you punish more frequently. That's not necessarily going to change it. You need a strategy.
Yeah, your first indication that maybe you're dealing with something different is exactly what you said. I keep spanking him and it doesn't stop. I scream and yell at him, doesn't stop. I punish him, I give him time, doesn't stop. No matter what I do, it doesn't stop. So the things that parents normally do to change behavior doesn't work with these kids. And when we were talking about this in young children, we talked about these behaviors being more intense, more persistent, more consistent. They just don't respond to all the things that parents normally do. That's the first indication that you're probably dealing with a different kind of problem. And maybe you've entered the world of mental illness, whether it's ADHD or ODD or whatever. You're entering a different realm, and it's going to require a different approach.
Right. So today we're going to kind of dig into some recommendations by a website called Raising Troubled Kids. And this is, this is Ross Greene. Ross Greene is the author of The Explosive Child. He has written a lot of books about parenting, about teaching and students at home and at school. And more specifically, he talks about something called a collaborative problem-solving approach to parenting and to managing students with and kids with challenging behaviors. And so we're going to talk a little bit about their strategies on how to manage defiant behavior.
Right. Yeah. And they're as good as anybody. They've been at it a long time. Yeah. It's a group at Harvard, and they've done a lot of the original research in this area. And so these are tried and true. Right. And so these are things that parents can rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that they talk about, and it's consistent with what we were just talking about, is that, you know, recognize that parenting is difficult. You know, we kind of begin with this idea that, you know, parenting is this natural thing, it's so easy, and we just have our kid, you know, and that works in movies and in different places. But reality is that parenting is hard, and especially when you have a kid with some challenging behaviors, you know, we have to make sure that we first take care of ourselves. And, you know, parents, you are not doing anyone any benefit by, you know, being sleep deprived, or by, you know, not taking care of yourself. We've talked before about, you know, putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, because if you're not stable, if you're not healthy, you're not going to really be able to help your kid get stable and healthy.
That's right. Right. These are enormous challenges, and they are going to wear you out. And so you have to take care of your physical and emotional health. You have to sleep well. You have to eat well. You have to take breaks once in a while. This is a very long, years long process. And you need to take care of yourself, because you're going to need your strength and your patience in order to manage and help these kids.
Right. And one of the ways to help sort of keep your sanity, you know, this group recommends or encourages us to focus on just one thing at a time. We kind of talked about it last week, that, you know, you can't solve all of the problems at one time. You can't, you know, if you can't get your kid to go to school, get it in the car and go to school in the morning, there's really no reason to create battles and fight over, you know, whether he's brushing his teeth or not, or, you know, leaving his clothes on the floor. You need to address and deal with one issue at a time, so that you can put all of your energy into that and solve that problem before you go on to another problem.
That's right. And that's a common mistake. We get impatient with ourselves and say, well, we have all, and now he's yelling at me, and now he's throwing a tantrum, and now, no, calm everything down. And maybe your first goal is just to get the child in the car on time.
Right.
Okay. Forget about everything else. Accomplish that goal. And then when you've done that, then you can go back and address all these other issues that are really tangential and less important. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what we fail to recognize sometimes is by decreasing the number of things that we're arguing and fighting about, we're going to improve the relationship that we have, and we're going to make things better just by itself. Just by decreasing the number of battles, we're going to make things better. And when we stop all the battles, what we find is that we might have enough time to do something fun, to do something positive with your child. You know, Richard, how many times do we talk to parents and it's like they don't even enjoy spending time with their kids? They don't like being, right. They don't like them.
Right. These are difficult kids. I mean, it's easy to reach that point of saying, I just don't like to be around him.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be irritable. They can be oppositional, testy, you know, and they're just difficult to be around.
Right.
So find something. You want to love them and you want to hold them, but geez, they keep fighting with you.
Right. Well, I mean, it would be the same way with anything. If every time you do something, every time you touch the flower, you get stuck by a thorn, you're going to stop trying to touch the flower. You know, it's the same way with your kids. If every time you try to get close to them, you know, they're biting your head off, you're probably not going to keep trying. So, so find something positive to do so that you don't get attacked every time you try to interact with your child. So your child recognizes that, hey, sometimes when mom comes to talk to me, we're going to go do something fun, not something negative every time.
That's right. And, you know, Russ Barkley that's one of the steps in his 8 or 10-step program for defiant children. And I think it's step 4. And he says, you know, just take some peaceful time where you're not teaching, you're not disciplining, you're just being with your child and having fun. So that because parents, I mean, that's what happens to us. Every interaction with this child is negative.
Right.
Okay? So knowing that, step back and carve out some time when the two of you are doing something that doesn't create conflict, and so that at least this interaction is positive.
Right. Now, one of the recommendations from this website that I know that we really use a lot with parents that we work with is the idea of, we always want to set limits. We always want to create structure. But at the same time, we have to have some flexibility within that structure. Structure is great, but when structure is black or white, when it's yes or no every time, it makes some things very difficult. There are some absolute black and white, but there are many things that can be adjusted, or they can be molded to look a little bit different on any given day or for any given situation. So you want to be consistent, you want things to be predictable, but you also want to be able to respond to what's going on.
Right.
Just an example we often work with parents is, like I strongly encourage parents to have their kids do homework, right after they get home. Maybe take a short break to get a little snack or go to the bathroom or something, but otherwise, you get right at homework because your brain is still in school mode and you want to do that. But if your kid comes home and, he's exhausted and, because he didn't sleep very well last night and he's cranky and irritable, it may be a good idea to adjust that, that expectation that day and say, what, let's take let's rest a little bit first. Why don't you take a 30-minute nap, or why don't we put homework off for right now and do something different, so that, because otherwise it's just going to be a battle. And now you're fighting over homework that, it's just homework.
Because you have to do it at that time. That's the black and white part. Now, you don't have to. It's, you set that expectation, you set that bound, you set that limit, and say that that's the schedule, this is our structure. But you're right. What if the child has a cold? What if the child had a bad day at school? What if the child was bullied on the bus? And you have to account for that stuff. So we all have off days or bad days. So do children. So do teenagers have many bad days. Okay. Yeah. But you try to keep things as calm as you can on that day and prepare to get back on schedule the next day.
Right.
So don't create a firestorm just because we're off schedule one day.
Right. And it could be things within the parents as well. If you had a bad day at work and that, for homework is tough because the kid is having a hard time learning fractions or something, and you recognize that you just don't have the patience to sit down for 2 hours and try to work, battle over that. Had that conversation. And again, I strongly encourage parents to be very open with their kids about that. Hey, look, buddy, I had a really rough day today.
Right.
And, we can maybe do homework for a few minutes, but let's just take the rest of the night off and we'll figure something out later.
And in doing that, you're modeling the behavior that you want your children to display. If I get home and I say, honey, I've had a horrible day today and I'm under enormous pressure. How about if we just take the day off? Let's do something different. Let's just go out and get something to eat and just relax. So you're modeling the very behavior that you want your kids to display.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about that a little bit last week. So, so be structured and consistent, but be flexible as well. Read the room. I also like the idea. We talk about rewards and punishments a lot on the podcast, and we tend to be ones who resist that urge to really focus and adhere strictly to this reward punish perspective. But I do like the idea of unexpected rewards.
Right.
Just, what? It's not for anything special. Let's just go get some ice cream. You don't have to. I think that we get into this routine, and a lot of times when people use rewards and punish as a ways to manage behavior, for some reason we figure that to do something nice for our kids, there has to be a reason.
They have to do something first.
They have to earn it, right? It's like, no, I love my kids no matter what. And so, you know, let's just go get ice cream tonight. You didn't have to do anything to earn it. You don't have to earn my love. You don't have to earn time with me. Let's just go do this.
Right, right. You know, it's true. Imagine the typical, I mean, the comparison I always use is, imagine if you walk in the door and you bring something for your spouse or your partner, okay? Unexpected. It's Wednesday in March and you bring flowers home, okay? What an enormous impact that has on your partner. Say, gee, here we are in the middle of the month and he's being nice to me, or she's being nice to me. Same with your children, you know, just unexpectedly affirm your feelings for them and your love for them. No, you don't have to earn all that stuff. Right. You know, the other thing that I forgot about that we haven't talked about in these, you remember Russ Barkley's, I think it was Russ Barkley's idea that for every negative comment, you have to make 4 positive comments.
Yeah.
Okay. What you're going to find when dealing with these kids is most of your interactions with them are negative. And right. So you have got to start building in some positive responses and some positive attitudes toward these kids, because it's true for all of us. You're going to find that most of your interactions are negative, and you have to find a way to get some positives in there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we are one of the ideal types of parenting styles is authoritative parenting, where you're working with your child and you're giving examples and you're answering the questions of why, and you're doing those kinds of things. But when it comes to really challenging kids, when it comes to kids who are pushing limits, are oppositional, are really challenging you on a day-to-day basis, that's when you want to kind of pull back from that a little bit, not to the point to where you're authoritarian necessarily, but you have to avoid the pitfall of rationalizing or trying to reason with your kids. These challenging kids, you know, this is the way that things are, and this is the way that we do things in the house. I love you. I understand that you don't like it, but this is the way we do things in the house. And there are going to be many things that just aren't up for discussion.
Right.
You know, your 12-year-old isn't going to stay out of the house and running around the neighborhood until 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
Not going to reason about that. We're not going to rationalize that. I'm not going to give you lots of other reasons why. Mm-hmm. That's just the rule, that we're not going to do those behaviors.
Right. Yeah, you have to have some. I mean, there have to be limits. You and I believe in collaborative problem solving, right? I think even with pretty difficult kids, you can say, hey, look, do you agree that we have a problem? Yes. Okay, what is the problem? They define it. Say, okay, how can we fix that? What can you do to change? You ask the child, what can you do to change that? Well, but you're not in a democracy when you're a parent. And especially with these kids, they don't get an equal say. If you have a child who's easy to raise, easy temperament, you can do collaborative problem solving because they're mindful, they're considerate, they think about things, and collaborative problem solving works really well with those kids because most of your interactions are positive. Mm-hmm. Okay? With these kids, most are negative, and you have to set some firmer limits with them. So you want to use collaborative problem solving, but you don't want to get into give them a vote in things. Remember, these are kids who are already struggling, right, and they're not going to reason or think through things the way your other children might. Absolutely. And so you can't get into these negotiations with these kids because by definition, they're not making good decisions.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes into the next thing is that, you know, because they have difficulty, because they're not going to be happy with the decision, right, because they may not have a say in everything, you have to find a way to tolerate some expression of frustration.
Right.
You know, I get that a lot of people have a really hard time with when people slam doors. That is not a problem that I ever had. I don't, you know, you can slam your door. That's fine. It doesn't bother me. You know, don't
Right.
break it, because that's gonna,
And that's a different issue.
that's a
Yeah,
different issue.
that's property destruction.
And that's gonna, now that's gonna affect your privacy, because now you're not gonna have a door, and that doesn't make sense. But
Right.
you know, again, we talked about this last week. There are many things that I get upset about, and
Right.
so to have my 13-year-old, you know, express some frustration and anger about having to do something that he doesn't want to do,
Mhm.
why would I expect him to be pleased with it? You know, I know that he's not going to be happy with that. And so if he slams the door, if he yells in his room, or, you know, we encourage kids to like yell into their pillows and things like that. That's fine. Express that aggression, express that anger, get it out. But, you know, just don't destroy things. Don't do dangerous things.
Right. And you can't, you know, it's unreasonable. You don't expect an adult to be in a good mood every day or not express aggression or anger on occasion. Well, kids are the same way. They're like us. They have good days and bad days. And some days they're testy and they're angry, and they have to be allowed to express that anger.
Yeah.
So don't worry. But again, it falls under that heading of let's deal with one problem at a time. You've asked, you know your child is upset. You've asked your child to clean the bathroom, clean the bedroom, clean up the room, and then they get angry. Okay, now you've asked, you want the room to be clean. You make the request, the child gets angry and slams the door. Now you have a second fire burning.
Right.
And then you go in to say something to the child, and the child says something nasty to you. Well, now you have a third fire burning. Now you have three problems. You started out with one, you just want the room to be cleaned.
Right.
But now you're reacting to your child and you're setting new fires. And suddenly you have the whole house is ablaze.
Right.
So don't react to that stuff.
And you're probably making it worse by reacting.
Absolutely.
So we want to be, the website talks about being a marshmallow.
Be a marshmallow.
You don't want to be, in our book, we talked about being a willow as opposed to an oak tree, you know, a willow, so that you bend and you sway with those torrential winds that come through sometimes. But, you know, we have to find a way to de-escalate, and you never de-escalate by being immovable.
Right.
You know, you have to sway, you can't take some of these things personal. You know, these kids will, and this goes for parents as well as teachers, you know, these kids will cuss sometimes. You know, they'll call you names. They'll call you bad names.
Bad stuff. Right.
But you know, it's because they're angry. It's because, you know, oftentimes because they know it's going to cause a reaction from you.
Right.
You know, but you respond by interpreting it for them. You know, if they call you a name, you say, man, it sounds like you're really upset. What's going on?
Yeah.
What's happening? You know, yeah, you know, you keep calling me that. I hear you. But that's not telling me what's going on. If you want, I would like to, but I need you to tell me what's going on. But so I'm guiding the kid to understand that maybe I'm trying to help, but the way that he's communicating isn't giving me any information.
That's right. That's
focused on a name that he's calling me. That doesn't matter to me.
Right. Because all you can do is overreact to name calling.
Right.
It doesn't solve it. I mean, you are not in possession of any information if your child calls you a name. And I don't care what the name is, and I don't care how they modify the name with whatever adjective they want to use. Okay. So regardless of what they call you, as hurtful as it is to you, you don't have any information to act on.
Right.
The only thing you might do is you might say to your child, you can't, you're being disrespectful, or you can't call me that. Well, now you're just reacting to the name calling. You solve the problem. The child, okay? But again, that's starting another fire. What you want to do is you want to know what I know. Wow, you're really angry. Tell me what you're angry about.
How many times, Richard, do we hear about kids will call a parent a name and the parent will start calling the kid names?
And you call, yeah.
I mean, once again, you go back to what we were talking about earlier, you're modeling the behavior.
Right.
He's doing exactly what you do. We say that to parents, sometimes the parents, well, he said it first. Okay. Now we're all teenagers because that's
right.
silly.
So you're descending to that level.
Absolutely. So,
And God, believe me, remember the first thing we said, this is hard.
Yeah.
Okay. We understand it's hard. We understand that we're asking you to do something that nobody else would ask you to do.
Right.
I mean, everybody else would say, oh, I'd slap him in the face. Oh, I'd do this or I'd do that, or he wouldn't go out, I'd take his phone for a month. That's not solving the original problem.
Right.
And you're probably not, because you still don't know what made this kid so angry or why he's gotten to, what has caused this child to get to this level of anger, because he doesn't always call you that.
Right.
He's calling you that now for some reason. We have to figure out what that is.
Right. And another thing that the website talks about, and I think that, again, a lot of parents have a hard time with, is the website just says call their bluff. And again, you have to know your kid and you have to know the situation. If your kid has if 2 weeks ago your kid ran away and was gone for 3 days until the police found him and brought him back. If your kid says that he's going to run away again, it's not a bluff. That's probably will really run away. But if your 8-year-old is scared of the dark, and it's 10 o'clock at night and he says he's going to run away, the likelihood is that he's not going to leave the house because it's dark outside and he doesn't want to be out there. So, but maybe a different way of thinking about it besides just calling their bluff is, again, don't get pulled into these threats that they make. Just like you don't want to get pulled into it when they're calling you a name. If your kid says, I'm going to run away, say, okay, I hear that's what you're going to say. I would like for you to, if you're going to leave, tell me where you're going. Because if you don't, I need to make sure that you're safe.
Right. Or I'll bring you clothes and some food, let me know where you are and I'll bring you your stuff. What stuff do you want me to bring? And I can deliver it there tomorrow.
I remember one time, Richard, we had remember that patient that we had, this was probably 15 years ago. And he said he was going to run away. And we said, well, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And he said, he's going to go live in the woods. What are you going to do in the woods? Living out there, like you don't have anything. Well, I'll just sit out there and play video games.
Woods.
How are you going to play video games in the woods? There's no place to plug. I'll have an extension cord. So clearly the kid he's not going to run away. Going anywhere. No. But again, we kind of get pulled into this argument about something that's not realistic, that's not going to happen. And you just have to resist that bait. Right.
And the other, so running away is one of the things that kids threaten. The other that really gets parents' attention is they threaten suicide. They threaten, I'm going to kill myself. Okay. And I love the way Ross Green, I love the way this particular program addresses that issue because it's very specific. And I think most kids, when they threaten this, are not serious.
Right.
Okay. Now, you don't want to just call their bluff because you don't want to, this isn't a game of poker. And so you don't want to see how far it'll go. They say, I'll kill myself. Rarely true. Again, if there's no history of that, if there's no history of self-destructive behavior or cutting or anything like that, it's just a way to get your attention to see if you'll back down. Can I use this approach to get my parents to back off? If I threaten to kill myself, then maybe my parents will let up. Right.
And oftentimes they don't really mean they want to kill themselves. What they really mean is that I want out of this situation.
Right. That's right.
And so the, an appropriate way for a parent to respond to that, again, without getting drawn into it, and is, man, it really sounds like you're upset. And if you mean what you're saying, that means that you are really potentially you're in crisis. We need to get you help. And if that's the way that you feel, we may need to go to the hospital, or we may need to, see somebody immediately to get you help so that you're not in crisis anymore.
Right. Don't panic. Again, the parent, you put on your oxygen first.
Right.
You don't panic because your child's threatening suicide. You simply say, wow, I think you really mean that. This is serious and we need to go to the hospital. So get yourself ready and we'll go. And most kids at that point say, well, wait a minute, I don't need to go to the hospital. No, this is a serious thing. If your child really gets upset and loses control completely, you just have to call 911. Right. You're still going to go to the hospital, but you're going in a Baker Act rather than voluntarily. Right. But I would call them and say, well, you sound serious, so let's get you to the hospital.
Right. So parents, please recognize that calling their bluff with saying that I'm going to run away may be, okay, let's pack you some clothes and let's make sure you have some snacks and let me know where you're going. But if they say I'm going to kill myself, calling their bluff isn't, well, go ahead. That's not calling their bluff. That is a really bad idea. Calling their bluff is, man, it sounds like you are in crisis. We need to go to the hospital and get you evaluated. So ensuring their safety is always top priority.
But throughout all of this, you recognize the need that the parent has to stay calm. Right. You can't go to where the child is. You have to stay calm so the child gets to where you are. Right. If you're name calling, if you're getting angry, if you're getting loud, you're modeling the very behaviors that you're trying to ameliorate, that you're trying to terminate.
Absolutely. So when we think about some general rules for parents, going along with what you're just saying is that, if your kid is having a hard time, if your kid has some of these troubling behaviors and they're, your kid doesn't want to be doing this any more than you want to be doing it. He doesn't want to keep getting in trouble. He doesn't want everything to be a fight. So don't blame your kid. Don't get into that way of thinking that it's just a bad kid. You can't blame him or her for what's happening. It's just, it's a situation, it's a battle that you're both fighting.
Yeah. This isn't, don't blame your child for the behavior. When you talk about kids who are at this level of struggle, who are struggling this hard with life, with school, with friends, with parents, with siblings, don't blame the child. They're not battling. They're not after you. And you don't want to get into that mindset of, my child is doing this on purpose. My child is just tormenting me. My child is this and my child is that. Try not to even use those sentences. Right. Your child is struggling. Figure out what the struggle is. Stop blaming the child for whatever's going on. Your child is the one having the struggle. Mm-hmm. So let's figure out what the struggle is. It's not because they weren't put on earth to make your life miserable.
Yeah, promise.
You just happen to be there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, you don't, another rule for parents is don't ignore other things that could be contributing to it. We tend to look at the kid and we're focusing on the kid and we're focusing on the behavior and then those subsequent fires that start from that behavior. But it sounds, sometimes it sounds so silly to say this to parents, but when we talk to them about their behavior and a parent will say, well, it's almost guaranteed that it's going to happen when we have to get him up early for school, because it's just so hard to get him out of bed. Okay, well, maybe he's tired. Maybe he's not sleeping well, or it's always bad right after school. Okay, maybe he needs a snack, or maybe maybe he's being bullied, or maybe he's tired again. There's lots of other potential reasons for why these things are happening. One is the child, but if there are family dynamics happening at home that are causing problems, that could be an issue. If there are social issues with peers, that could be an issue. There are lots of other things that are outside of the child and his or her biology that could be causing some of these things.
Yeah, we all know how sensitive teenagers are, how emotionally fragile they are. Most of them are. Their behavior may not be about you. You hear them use foul language. They call you a name. They raise their voice. They express their anger. You think it's about you. What if they were in school that day and they were kicked out of the lunch group? You know, they have this group every day where they all have lunch together, and suddenly your daughter said, you can't sit here anymore. Well, that's devastating to a teenager. Okay, that's what they're bringing home. It's their anger, their mood, their behavior has nothing to do with you. It's what happened at school that day. So don't ignore the other challenges that might explain their behavior. Make sure you know what you're dealing with.
Right. And
don't make it about you.
Right. And at the same time, don't take your issues out on your kid. So if you're angry or you're upset, you don't take that out on your kid. You know, there are times when you're going to be snippy and you're going to respond because you had a rough day at work, and then your kid says no or something like that, and you're going to, you know, don't tell me no, and you're going to go at them, you know, go back and apologize if that happens. But don't allow yourself to take your frustration out on your kid. Be self-aware enough, have enough insight to say, you know what, I think that I responded to that poorly because I had a really rough day. It's not an excuse. It's just that's the reason why that happened, and I'm sorry that I responded to you the way that I did.
That's right. And you're modeling
with your kid.
You're modeling the apology. It's okay to apologize. You know, you should, but you have to model that for your children.
Right.
Okay? If you apologize to them, you're not groveling, you're apologizing. You're not asking for their forgiveness. That's not what you're doing. You're simply apologizing for your bad behavior, which is exactly what you want your kids to do.
Absolutely.
Model what you want.
Absolutely. And we already talked about, you know, not, again, with these kids, you want to avoid those battles of explaining and justifying and rationalizing and reasoning, because it's just not going to get you anywhere.
That's right. Before kids are in elementary school, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, all these verbal, rational explanations, they're falling on deaf ears. Yeah. You know, when parents try to reason and explain things to a 4 or 5-year-old, that's not accomplishing anything. They don't bother. And if you have a teenager or an older adult and they have this long track record, the lectures and the explanations aren't accomplishing anything.
Right.
You know, you don't need to justify or explain. This is just how it is. This is what we do on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock.
Right. Yeah. It's because once you find yourself going down that path, you're going to very quickly figure out that you have a really difficult time explaining why, you know. Now, I always had a reason why I wanted my kids to pick up their stuff and to clean up their toys and pick them up off the floor. But a lot of parents have a hard time explaining to their kids why they want their room, why they need to have their room clean. I'll just shut my door. Nobody has to see it. I can shut my door.
Right.
It's my room. I'm the one that lives in there. Why does it matter? Oh no, this is my house. Okay, that's not a reason. And
and when you, when you tell your child, this is my house, well, then it's not their room.
Right.
It's your room. When you tell your kids, this is my house, you're just allowed to live here, well, then they are guests and they start to act like guests. This isn't my room. I don't have any investment here. I don't own anything here.
When I stay at a hotel, somebody else can clean things up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If I'm just a guest, and that's what you're telling me, it's not your room. Be careful with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've had a podcast about this before, but another rule for parents is to just stop over pathologizing. Yeah. Every behavior, every misbehavior, every challenge that you experience with your kid is not some sign of pathology. If your kid likes to have things exactly the same way every time, that doesn't mean that he's OCD. If your kid, is rigid and, has some social awkwardness and he plays video games all day long, he's not necessarily autistic. Don't keep pathologizing every behavior. Because as soon as we are doing that, again, we're kind of going down that path of, okay, there's that example. Here's a medication for that, or it doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah, especially with teenagers, because teenagers tend to act oddly, and that's normal. Odd behavior is normal for teenagers. Mood swings are normal. Getting angry is normal. Getting aggressive for boys is normal.
Right.
Okay? So you're right, don't pathologize everything.
Yeah. And we talked before about not doing the same thing and expecting something different to happen. Don't keep trying the same punishments or the same consequences. Because sometimes what we need to do is something that we don't necessarily want to do. It is sometimes a very obvious thing. Like sometimes we just need to lower our expectations. If you want your kid to clean his room, but he fails every time to meet your expectations, maybe change your expectations. Maybe the best he can do is to have everything up off the floor. Doesn't look nice on the shelves. The drawers don't close all the way, but let's just start with, okay, you got everything up off the floor. That's great. Okay. And then you can build from there, but let's manage our expectations.
One of the most frequent stumbling blocks for parents raising, especially teenagers, is that they will say, well, I showed him how I want him to do it. And he'll go in and clean the bathroom, but it's not done the way I taught him to do it. Mm-hmm. Well, now be very careful with that, because the first thing you want your child to do is you want them to clean the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Okay. How well they do it is a completely different issue. Right. So don't mix the two. You can always get to perfection. Okay. You can always get to your standard. I've had many parents say, well, I don't let my daughter run the vacuum cleaner because she doesn't do it the way I want. It's okay. All we want her to do is assume responsibility for running the vacuum cleaner. Right. Once we've accomplished that, then we can get everything to look perfect so that the nap is all going in the same direction. That's a completely different issue. The first thing we want you to do is we want you to clean the bathroom. We can gradually get to, this is what I want it to look like.
And Richard, again, I keep saying this, giving examples and say, how many times does this happen? But how many times have we talked to kids and he's like, all I have to do is, do it the wrong way, and mom will go in there and she'll do it. She'll take care of it. Yeah. She'll yell a little bit, but she yells about everything. So it doesn't really matter. She'll yell about it a little bit, but then she'll go in and fix it, and I don't have to.
Right. So I can just do part of the job, and because I know mom will come in and clean up after me.
Right. So again, avoid that battle, parents. Avoid that battle.
Or these poor kids who, he said, I did clean the bathroom, but then my dad came in and said, I didn't do it right. I forgot to do this, or I forgot to do that. And now the kid's discouraged. Now they don't want to do anything because it's never good enough.
Right. Yeah. Right. And we've also had a few podcasts in the past where we've talked about attribution styles.
Yeah.
And avoiding that tendency to attribute intent or some purpose to your child's behavior. We don't really know, we spoke a few minutes ago about, well, he's not really, he doesn't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm really going to upset mom today. This is going to be one of those days. I really got her today. No, but sometimes parenting, when you're parenting, it feels that way. It feels like they're doing it on purpose, or it feels like they're doing it just to upset you. But that's you attributing that to the kid. That's you saying he's doing it just to upset me, or he's doing it because he wants his way.
Right.
But we have to avoid that that tendency to attribute those things and demonize our kids.
I think attribution, attributing anybody's behavior, whether it's a child, teenager, or even an adult, a coworker, or a student, attributing motives or attributing attributing motives in particular, usually gets you into trouble.
Yeah.
We really don't know why. We talked earlier about a teenager in anger calls you a name, okay, uses some profanity with you and calls you a name. We then immediately jump to, my child did that because of X. Okay,
Right.
you're just being disrespectful. Well, you're attributing an emotion. You're attributing motivation. You did that to be disrespectful. You did that to be mean. You did that to be. Those are attributions. Be careful about making attributions, because until you understand, you're probably going to be wrong.
Right. I was talking to a parent once, and like a lot of parents do, the only reason that he called me that word is because when he's playing his video game, that's how those people talk. That's how his friends on his video game talk. So he's just talking to me like he's talking to his friends. So I'm gonna take his video games away from him.
Right.
It doesn't. When we step back and we think about it, it doesn't have to do with that. Yes, he may talk to his friends that way, sure, but he's not talking to you that way because of him talking to his friends like that.
Right.
We do just kind of dig ourselves, and when we attribute, we tend to do so because we're taking it personally.
Mm-hmm.
We're again making it all about us, and not recognizing what's going on with the kids. So.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So on the website, and Ross Greene in general kind of talks about a couple of different approaches to parenting, and we've mentioned the collaborative, but first we'll talk about this parent management training that helps to educate parents in how to manage challenging situations.
Right. Yeah, and there are a couple of programs out there that you can access that will train you, give you the skills, at least some of the skills you need to raise children or teenagers with these very challenging behaviors. Right. It requires a different approach, and we're happy to say that there are some programs that are available on the internet that you can learn about. You can learn the skills that you need to manage these very difficult behaviors.
Absolutely. And we strongly encourage folks to check out, again, the collaborative problem solving approach. And that is one where you're working with the child to identify problems. And you're, as the name suggests, you're collaborating with the kid to problem solve through everything that's going on, to find a solution, to find a remedy to these issues so that things can get better.
Yeah, because one of the difficulties here is that in almost all of these cases, this is a battle of wills. We talk about power struggle, okay? But this is a battle of wills. I want you to do it this way. The child wants it to be done this way. I want the relationship to be this. The child wants the relationship to be this. That's a battle of wills. Well, rather than fighting that battle, which everybody is going to lose because you're going to damage the relationship, what Ross Greene and his group at Harvard are saying is, wait a minute, let's end the battle of wills and replace it with a collaborative approach where everybody gets a little bit of what they want and you have a peaceful relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time we've attempted that with patients and families that we've worked with, it's been effective. It's been helpful. I mean, there are those who where it doesn't work as well, and that typically is because either the parents or the kid aren't following through with the agreements and with the things that we talk about. But when everybody buys into it and is doing their work, it's a very effective program for managing things. And what parents, I think, are often surprised about is that when you sit down and you talk to the kid and you say, all right, so these are the rules that I would like to have in the house. Let's talk about consequences for not following through. It's remarkable how severe of punishments kids will recommend. Well, you should take my Xbox away for a month. Wait a minute, what? No, and so we have to tell them, no, that is not a good strategy. That is not a good consequence, because that's not realistic. You're going to have a problem. You tell the kid, you're going to get in trouble sometimes. It's going to happen. You don't want your Xbox being taken away for a month, because as soon as the parent tries to do that, now there's another battle.
You're starting another fire.
Right. So you have to make sure it's all realistic and everything. But that collaborative problem solving approach can really be an effective tool for helping parents deal with that.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's it for today. We kind of covered and went through a lot of different ideas and strategies. I put a link to in the show notes to the Raising Troubled Kids website. So check it out and see what you think. And, we'll talk more about some of these issues in future podcasts.
Right. Yeah, we'll revisit these issues periodically. This is difficult for most of us, and so we'll keep working on it.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.